Good evening, and tonight an orgy of fun, frolic and gay abandon, but first we have to get the programme out of the way. In the news this week, in Baghdad, Iraqi protesters show their displeasure at the latest UN sanctions by ruthlessly hitting themselves over the head with a brown towel. After a series of sex scandals bedevils his campaign, Bill Clinton visits local factories to try and put the subject out of his mind. And finally, to cheer up the Queen on her return from Germany, Buckingham Palace lay on a display by the Queen's own slightly barking trumpeters. On Ian Hislop's team this week, star of Beyond the Fringe, and not only but also former partner of Dudley Moore and leading light of the 60s satire boom, Danny Baker. Unfortunately, we were hoping to have Peter Cook this week, but he dropped out and we didn't have time to change the introduction. Still, I'm sure Danny won't mind, and if he does, it's too late. Our other guest this week is a presenter of a number of fashion programmes, and so used to being next to elegant people in fabulous clothes, which is why we've put her on Paul Merton's team, Annabel Giles. So, it's round one, the last words Lennox Lewis will hear on Saturday night. Two controversial. Two pieces of news film each to kick off. Just explain everything about them is all we ask. Ian and Danny, spot the connection.
Yeah, a stupid-looking puppet and sooty.
There is a school of thought to suggest that the old boy's gone potty. I don't know where this came from.
I think he's absolutely off his trolley, isn't he? Though, of course, that's not necessarily a bad thing. The previous Prime Minister was completely bonkers for about 11 years.
Yeah.
Never did her any harm.
No. Got a chat show out of it, I believe, isn't it? How these things happen, isn't it, Angus?
Yes, it is John Major, who, according to some sections of the press, has gone bonkers. The Times claimed that Mr Major wobbled alarmingly on September the 16th. Well, Linford Christie wobbles alarmingly every time he sets foot on the racetrack. And he's got a gold medal, so... The Prime Minister's sister, Pat, defended her brother, saying if people expected a miracle, they should have elected God. Well, how could they? She's in the House of Lords now, isn't she? According to psychologists, one of the signs of Major being slightly disturbed is that he's continually adjusting the front of his trousers. Well, in that case, David Mellor must be absolutely gaga. Paul and Annabel, pop megastar or odious little brat?
Is this Cleveland, the musical?
Didn't know there was one, but no, it isn't.
It's a little boy, isn't it? A French boy called Jordi, who's not related to Lindisfarne, is he, in any way, who is 5 and being a pop star.
He's entering the market in the week that called Sinead has withdrawn from the market.
You have to explain who Sinead is to Ian.
A cow who can't sing a note.
Another pop star, not much hair.
Oh, nothing compares to you, surely.
Oh. And you're criticising her?
The French don't.
You'd make a lot of money if you could find a cow that could sing in tune, though, wouldn't you? You'd make a fortune, wouldn't you? London Palladium, you just introduce the Edelweiss. Wonderful.
Yes, don't spend too long hunting for one, will you? It's Geordie Lemoine, who's become a pop star at the age of 4 and who's already been romantically linked to Cher. Geordie has had a #1 hit in France with Dur Dur d'être bébé, or It's Hard to Be a Baby. Where's it all going to end? It's tough being a fetus. It's by no means simple being an unfertilised egg. Geordie is now staying in the Hilton Hotel, where he drank the minibar dry of milk, threw his cot out of the window and had a string of Norland nannies in his room. Asked what he wanted from life, he said, a Harley Davidson. That'll look impressive with stabilisers. Ian and Danny, an Englishman abroad for you.
No. Is it in an effort to make the London Underground work properly, they brought over the original employers from the Burma Railway, by the look of it. It's a harsh regime, but it gets them running on time, Angus.
No, Patton, having lost Bath to the Liberal Democrats, is trying not to lose Hong Kong to the Communists.
It is Chris Patton, proving to be almost as popular with the Chinese as he was with the electorate of Bath. Patton's opposite number in Peking is Lu Ping at 83, the child prodigy of the Chinese government. Lu Ping alleges that the British government have broken their word. That's unheard of. But Mr. Patton claims that he knows nothing. Now, that's far more plausible. Lu Ping described Patton as Cho Qian Hong Yu De Xiao Ko, which means running dog who has stolen the sky, and Buku Sing Ring Di Bai Yako, which means untrustworthy jackal who has put up a counterfeit sun, and also Batsu Jing Sheng Shu Jishui, which means fat bastard who blew it as an MP. And finally in this round...
Are we sponsored by Linguaphone or something?
Last week we had Angus does German.
Yeah.
This week it's Angus shows a very rudimentary grasp of Cantonese.
We've got some French coming up as well. Look forward to that.
Can I just say, couldn't he fat choi, which means Happy New Year?
No,
It's a
you
year
can't.
since Maxwell died, so it's, it's a very Happy New Year for some of us.
Yes. And finally in this round, Paul and Annabel. What silly story is this?
Is that a clue that it's silly? Because that's a car, isn't it?
That's a car being towed.
I have absolutely no idea at all.
No, sort of silly story was a clue.
Is it the Silly Isles?
Yeah.
Is it the Silly Isles?
Yes, as it was your
Yeah,
question. I know you
And what about them, Paul?
Well, the Silly Isles...
It's full of cars.
What about the Silly Isles
There's
in
cars all
particular?
over
The Silly Isles car industry has ground to a halt.
Yeah.
It's pathetic to see a man
Yeah.
grapple, so isn't it? I'll give you one for getting Silly Isles, but
Why?
It's
Oh, hurrah!
because he said
I'll
Silly
give
Isles.
you
yeah.
one. Is that a promise? Seems to be the way the score's conducted on this programme.
Just because you lost last weekend. It's the news that MOT tests are being introduced to the Scilly Isles for the first time ever. Police estimate that 3/4 of the cars are unroadworthy. Some of the cars there are so decrepit that they use ice cream cartons for number plates, which explains why several hundred parking tickets a week are sent to Mr. Whippy. Scores of unwanted and useless cars have been dumped into the sea. Apparently Skoda at one stage were even planning to cut out the middlemen and deliver their new model straight to the cliff edge. All of which confusion brings us to the end of this initial round, at which point I have to tell you that Paul and Annabel have an almost pointless 3, and Ian and Danny have an astronomical 4. Round 2 lurks menacingly in the wings, but before we succumb, let's spill the seeds of our caption competition, one still per team. Ian and Danny, this is yours. Paul and Annabel, that's for you. So let's put all that behind us as we brace ourselves for the onset of round 2. One sensational tabloid headline per person. Paul. Anne's fear over nuclear deer.
Princess Anne has said that she's got this fear that deer might become nuclear. And
That's worth 10 points.
Yeah.
No.
The radiation, she's worried about the sort of excessive radiation on deer, and she's afraid that antelopes will mutate into giant jars of oil of ulei.
If we were awarding points for surrealism, then I'd give you a fish.
She says these deer must be moved away from nuclear power stations.
Yeah,
Must
because
be what?
They must be moved away from nuclear power stations because it's not healthy for the deer.
they pick
to
it
be
up in
near-
their antlers.
Yeah. No, their antlers pick up Channel 4.
Yeah.
And if you look in their eyes, you can see Jonathan Ross interviewing Madonna.
I'll tell you, it's the news that a number of Scottish red deer on the Balmoral estate were found with traces of radiation way above safety levels. Would have been all right, but the previous day they'd been sheep. According to the Red Deer Commission, based 60 miles from Balmoral, so they obviously know something the Royals don't, radioactive venison could have lasting effects on the people who eat it. I wonder if that extends to ear size. Annabel, what's this apology for a question? Sorry, the end of the world isn't nigh.
Oh, yes, now this is this lot. They were in Seoul, weren't they? And they're religious, fanatical, mad people, and they decided to all pile into the church and wait for the end of the world to come, and then at sort of 1 minute past midnight it hadn't happened, and by about 10 past they thought, well, we really better go home. And they were probably a bit upset because by then I bet they'd given everything away, hadn't they, to non-believers? So probably no homes to go to, so they're very upset, and
Very
that's
upset.
what that is.
Yes.
That's a full answer and probably 3 points.
It is. It's not that full, I'm afraid. No,
It was
you have 2
midnight,
points.
wasn't it? Originally it was going to be 12 midday until the leader of the sect pointed out that Henry Kelly's Go for Gold was on at 1. So should we make it midnight? And they said, yeah, that's what they do.
So we have something to thank him for, anyway. Yes, it is. It's all about Lee Jang Lim, a leader of the Christian church in Korea, who announced that he and his followers would ascend to heaven last Wednesday when the end of the world would begin. It would start with a 7-year period, unparalleled in trouble and horror. Economies will collapse, money will be worthless, people will be forced to use a special currency, and the Antichrist will be the leader of the European community, who is, of course, John Major. Bizarrely, Australian scientists concede he may be right, as they say a 6-mile-wide ice cube is heading for the Earth. Oliver Reed has already started working on a 7-mile-wide gin and tonic. The ice cube is actually due to arrive on August the 14th, 2116. A Croydon woman who's just fallen down the stairs is particularly worried because she's been promised an ambulance that day. Danny, a cunningly veiled pun for you. Hedgehogs on hedge of breakdown.
Hedgehogs are worried about, lots of things.
They're being run over, mostly, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, they're bloody fed up with all those prick jokes, aren't they? Yeah.
Well, if they're not, I am. Yes, it's the tragic news that these strains of modern life are leading hedgehogs to suffer anxiety attacks, heart conditions and hyperactive trauma. Esther Ranson is believed to be setting up a hog line for distressed species. Maybe that should be Geordie Lemoine's next single. It's Murder Being a Hedgehog. Jure d'etre hedgehog. That was the bit of French. I thought you were enjoying it.
I mean, you don't know the French for hedgehog.
Hog de hedge.
Good, just checking.
And lastly, Ian, who is the man who broke the Bank of England?
Norman Lamont. Next question.
It's correct, but not the answer I've got written down here.
There's a man, I think he's an American, some millionaire. He bet on the fact that the ERM would collapse about a year ago and made something like £1 billion zillion of taxpayers' money. So he's got all our money. So I hope you're going to give his address in your answer, Angus.
Unfortunately, I don't have it, otherwise I would do, gladly. Yes, it is financial whiz kid. George Soros is the name, who's admitted he made £1 billion on Black Wednesday, all at the taxpayers' expense. That means we paid him about £50 each. Soros said, I must have been the biggest single factor in the market. I'm not sure factor's quite the word I would have used, but his strategy to ruin the pound relied on finding some idiot prepared to buy $10 billion worth of sterling all at once. Enter Norman Lamont. And if only someone would, preferably with a red-hot poker. And so at the end of all this, Paul and Annabel grubbing around with 5, and Ian and Danny are shooting forth with 8. Well, it's time now to cast off the cloak of here and now and skinny dip in the pool of memories. But before that, our archive round. One piece of modern history each for you to tell us what happened after. Ian and Danny, who are these gentlemen and who are they visiting?
Oh. Piss off, we don't get up for an hour.
That's Bob and Paula's refreshing breakfast TV approach, isn't it? Well, I mean...
That's actually Pandora Maxwell saying, piss off, we don't get up for an hour, showing that she's inherited her father-in-law's charm. That was the Serious Fraud Office. Sorry to be serious. And Pandora Maxwell thought they were journalists.
Is there a frivolous fraud office? You know, where they come round at 6:30 in the morning, but they haven't got any trousers on.
I can't answer that question.
Smash down your doors with rubber hammers.
No.
Yeah. Those little whistle things that do that for your letterbox.
They come round and say, you fiddled your expenses, Paul. Very trivial fraud.
Expenses?
I'm sorry to drag you back to the question. It seems so irrelevant,
don't
but
then.
I won't. Let's take a peek.
I them a belt before the police?
We are the police.
Yes, it's Pandora Maxwell. It must be slightly strange being named after a box. Anyway, it's her. In June of this year, some 7 months after the fall, Paul and Annabel, a man of genuine wealth for you, on the occasion of his birthday.
I enjoyed the match. It was a very tough game. I think that was the hardest games I've played in, only because of the games I've had in a very short time.
Well, hopefully what happened is he said something I could understand. I don't know. What was he saying?
There were subtitles on CFAX.
Well, a gift.
Presumably, I mean, that cake goes into somebody's face.
Or he shuts up.
Want to nominate a face?
Does he cry?
No, he doesn't.
Could I nominate a face?
Yes.
I'd like to nominate President de Gaulle.
Well, OK, so you're saying that he throws this cake in President de Gaulle's face. Let's have a look.
President de Gaulle!
Yes, it's Gazza at Italia 90 on his 23rd birthday, even if it looked like his 13th, exhibiting the deft sense of comedy for which he is internationally renowned. Other comedy classics in his repertoire include lowering his shorts to expose his anus, sticking his tongue out during national anthems, that's always entertaining, and, of course, defecating in colleagues' tooth mugs. And at the end of that archival round, as always, it falls to me to inform you that Paul and Annabel continue to wilt with 6, and Ian and Danny blossoming into an attractive 10. And so we stand proud, ready to penetrate round 4, our quarterly odd one out round. 4 disparate entities, which one's face doesn't fit. Paul, an easy question for you this week. It's
good.
The answer that's rather tricky. Mr. Keith Oates of Chester, Mrs. Shawar Siddiqui of East Ewell, Mr. Robert Black of Glasgow, and Mr. Gwyn Jones of Aberystwyth.
That's awfully unfair.
If you take all the letters out of their names, does it form the anagram, my name's Angus Deaton and I'm crap?
No.
How am I...
Unfortunately.
Who are these... Why am I getting these impossible questions?
Because it's just such fun to see your reaction.
No, you're such a good sport, Paul.
Yes. I do so enjoy this part of the show. The answer is that 3 of them are governors of the BBC, those high-profile personalities. In case you were wondering where you've seen them before, Gwyn Jones went to school in North Wales and worked for Tesco's. Keith Oates has worked for Black & Decker and enjoys playing tennis. And Shawar Siddiqui taught physics at the Sutton Secondary School and is a member, as you'll know, of the Waltham Forest Housing Action Trust, all of which, of course, explains why they now arbitrate over what we watch on our televisions. Rather surprised you didn't get that one, actually, Paul.
I've been a fool.
The other one, which I'm surprised you didn't get, was Mr. Robert Black of Glasgow, who is my uncle. So, Annabel, 4 sex symbols for you. Cyril Smith.
Oh.
Madonna. Tim Curry.
Oh, is it?
And Captain Kirk. Yes, that's Tim Curry behind all that lot.
Looks like Cher.
So, well, all apart from Cyril Smith have probably worn tights in their time, haven't they? Or lycra, certainly. There's a spandex effect on their legs. And I reckon there probably isn't a pair of tights to fit Cyril Smith. So probably Cyril Smith is the odd one out for being much too fat to have a pair of lycra tights.
Right.
Have you got the new Madonna book yet?
I've seen bits of it.
It's actually quite heavy, you know, especially if you're holding it in one hand. Your uncle lent me a copy.
Yes, the answer is that they're all famous for wearing corsets, in fact, apart from Cyril Smith, who's probably the only one who actually needs one. In the 70s, Tim Curry wore a corset, black stockings, suspenders and lipstick in his role as Frankenfurter, or Frankenboffer, as he'd probably be called nowadays. And Captain Kirk wore...
Accuse me of being obsessed with Maxwell. God, what did Frank Boff do to you? No, I don't want to hear that.
want to know where Captain Kirk wears a corset. Do
I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Captain Kirk wore an
He's been
incredibly...
invaded by the Klingons. No.
I was going to avoid all that, but you did it, didn't you?
Extremely
Don't
I thought that was
explain
the kind of
that.
Madonna connection, because he could then say to go where most men have been before, in regard to Madonna.
Yeah, I'll tell you about Captain Kirk. He wore an incredibly tight corset, which is presumably why every programme started with the captain's log. Danny, a not-so-lucky dip for you. Princess Margaret, Richard Branson, Carla Lane, and Eton School.
Well, both Eton and Princess Margaret have something to do with fags, don't they? They,
You're talking about cigarettes?
No, homosexuals.
Because everybody at Eton College, and Princess Margaret, and Carla Lane, and Richard Branson all had that woman on the left at the top there.
yeah.
Yes.
And Princess Margaret was just saying to her, I bet that was good, wasn't it?
I'm very
She's 30,
relieved.
that woman.
I'm very relieved to say no, it isn't. It's Princess Margaret, as all the others own islands, whereas she just likes to spend a lot of time on other people's. Eton School owns an island in the Thames, an ideal place to banish naughty third-formers who refuse to sleep with their housemasters. Richard Branson owns the Caribbean island of Necker, an ideal place to avoid publicity and overexposure, which is why he never goes there. And sitcom writer Carla Lane owns the island of St Tudwalls off the coast of Wales. And what's the betting, her ex-husband, now married to her mother-in-law's bank manager, moves into the island next door, with hilarious consequences. And finally, Ian, 4 saintly figures for you. Cliff Richard, the Bishop of Galway, Samantha Fox, and the lovely Stephen Fry.
I used to go out with the Bishop of Galway.
Yes, that's not the answer, though, Paul. True as it may be.
He wasn't as black and white in those days.
I think this is...
That's me behind him there, look. He's just said to me out the corner, lose yourself, there's a photographer in the room.
It's not the right answer, unfortunately.
No, it never is the right answer.
Never the right. It's an interesting answer, then, more interesting than the one I've got.
And probably more interesting than the one I've got. Because I haven't got one.
That's bloody interesting.
Is it a celibacy question?
It is.
I thought it would be, because that's what's famous about certain of those people,
Samantha Fox.
apart from contributing to the export trade of Colombia. Sam Fox says she doesn't have sex anymore because no one can get near her. Obvious, yes. Stephen Fry's celibate. He doesn't do anything. And the Bishop of Galway is meant to be celibate, but he
He's not,
has Paul Merton.
Yes, it is. It's the Bishop of Galway, as all the others are avowed celibates. Stephen Fry admits to being half gay, presumably the bottom half. And Samantha Fox also refrains from having full sex. That must be a blow for her boyfriend.
That's even worse than the can't get near her joke.
Slightly worse. The Bishop of Galway, on the other hand, fathered a love child by Anne Murphy, who described their first encounter in her book. His eyes lit up. I unfastened my blouse and bra and let them fall to the ground.
Why does he wear in her blouse and bra?
We may never know. Which scurrilous nonsense brings us crashing to the end of that revealing round, and the overriding concern is for Paul and Annabel, who have a painfully amateur 7, while Ian and Danny have a ruthlessly efficient 12. And so we clear the stage for our end game, the final missing words round. 2 swatches of incomplete headlines await the random guesswork of each team. They who lie last guessed first, so Paul and Annabel, here are your 5 easy pieces. Priests to what if Synod rebuffs women?
Projectile vomit.
Strike is in fact the right answer. Next, BBC riddled with what, says TV Chief?
Awful hosts of topical quiz shows.
Red tape is a slightly dull answer. Next, Smith is caught in what?
Sarah Green's bedroom.
Well, I'll take your word for it. You obviously know something we
Like
don't.
a U-turn.
Forms of a dilemma.
Wilson's dilemma is, in fact, the
Some
right
sort of
answer.
disease.
Next, Major to risk all on what?
Favourite of 3:30.
Maastricht,
Risk all on-
in fact, was the right answer. And lastly, Heseltine comes out what?
Full stop.
Fighting.
Is the right answer.
Oh,
Well done.
good.
Very good.
Point.
Slightly
Fighting
late,
who?
but very good. Right, Ian and Danny, prepare to receive your fives, starting with Aliens Rush for rights in what?
William
No-
Shatner's corset.
Is he?
Holland is, in fact, the right answer. Next, Paranoid Perot scores what?
With Mrs. Bush.
Own goal.
Own goal.
Oh, yeah.
Is a very good
the
answer.
lesbian smears again.
Farmers find what in peas?
Comfort. Lord Lucan.
Easy pickings is the rather dull answer. Next, young people what about Radio 1?
Ask their parents about.
Find out. Yeah.
Passionate is, in fact, the answer.
Passionate?
What?
Yes, a rather strange answer.
Yeah.
And finally,
Dull lives they
outcry
have.
at £3 million bill to put Maggie in what?
Lunatic asylum.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty cheap, 3 million myself.
Orbit.
Orbit is a lovely answer, but not true. Office is,
Exciting,
again,
exciting,
the
that is.
slightly disappointing answer, which expert incompetence brings us gratefully to the end of this final act of desperation, and it would seem to appear that this week's first night flops are Paul and Annabel with 11, and this week's overnight sensations are Ian and Danny with 13. So, a year's subscription to Sky for our winners, 2 years subscription to Sky for our losers. But before we can all go home, thank you, Danny, here's the genuinely small matter of our captioning competition. Ian and Danny, what did you come up with?
At last, something decent's come out of Archer's head.
Paul and Annabel, what do you think of this?
Look at that old trout.
On which feasible note...
I wouldn't like one of them to swim up my arse.
What do you say?
I wouldn't like one of them to swim up me arse.
Bravo.
I'll say it again. I wouldn't like one of them to swim up my arse.
Yes, that's fine. On which note we say thank you to our panellists, Ian Hislop and super sub Danny Baker, Paul Merton and Annabel Giles. And I leave you with news that Keith Richards has denied his drug problem is getting out of hand as the finishing touches are put to his new syringe. A leaked photograph suggests that the police may have embarked on their own version of the Madonna book. And finally, after Bill Clinton's good looks are revealed to be winning him female votes, Ross Perot launches a last-ditch campaign to attract the male vote. Good night.
Will Ken Livingstone have a mare in London, or will Merton and Hislop just take him to the tabloids? Have I got 1992 for you at the same time tomorrow? Now though, time to strap yourself in for a double bill of Accident Blackspot, part of UK TV's Crash Week.